Child abusing the comfort, the covenant. God, guess I'm due to get humbled. Are you gonna gain the world? God's really just showing me that I don't have to arrange all of the details of my life and worry so much about the things that are to come and what's going to happen. And, you know, I don't have to worry about building a name or reputation for myself, that if I seek first his kingdom and I just go and I just do with what he's given me, then he's going to open up doors. And so that's where I'm at. I want to talk a little bit about my testimony, though, because I have my testimony on video a little bit here or there spread across the web, but I really want to do an official, just like lay it all out on the line testimony. And so that's what I plan to do today. What's really cool is recovery and drug addiction is a big part of my testimony, the testimony that God's given me. And so I know that I'm involved pretty heavily in the community here in Ohio with recovery, and God's opening up doors with that thing right now, and it's super awesome. So there's going to be a lot of that involved, and I'm just going to kind of start from the beginning with how God became real to me and where I'm at now. So, you know, when I was younger, I was very aware as a child just about my surroundings and what was going on around me. It was just one of those things that other kids seem to be like glued to the TV or whatever. Don't get me wrong, had my moments. I mean, I definitely loved me some Blue's Clues, but I was very aware as a kid as far as what was going on around me. And ever since I was young, my dad, very open with his story now. You know, he leads a recovery ministry and he does a lot of good things for the community. But my dad struggled with an addiction. And I can remember ever since I was a child, maybe finding things in his drawer or just having an understanding of kind of the depression in our home. As far as those things were concerned, I remember going to maybe people's houses and they had other kids, and my dad and his friends would go downstairs and they'd be like smoking and drinking, and I got the vibe for what that meant, if that makes sense, ever since I was a young kid. As I started to get older, and really just around 8, 9, maybe 10, I don't remember exactly, but I started to get older and started getting into grade school. And my dad's addiction obviously progressed to the point to where it was like, he's not going to bring it around us as kids. He never really used hard drugs or anything like that in our home. But what that meant is he was going up to, you know, the ghettos in Canton and Akron a lot. Canton, Ohio, Akron, Ohio. And, you know, we wouldn't see him for a week. You know, 3 days, 4 days a week, and at the worst, 2, 3 weeks when it was, you know, at its worst later in life. But, you know, I remember being a kid and feeling like just being able to sense my mom's pain and frustrations and stuff like that. And me just knowing that, you know, my dad's out doing something he shouldn't be doing. I just understood that. And I didn't actually fully know what that meant until I got older a little bit. But, you know, I would wait till 3 o'clock in the morning knowing that my dad might call the house. So while other kids were sleeping in their bed, and this doesn't go for everybody, but while most kids were sleeping in their bed and not worrying about the worries of the world at 8 or 9, I was waiting for my dad to call the house so I could answer the phone as soon as my mom answered it. This is when home phones were a thing. And then put it on mute so I could listen in to the conversations between my mom and my dad. Because I had this seriously very gnawing urge to have to know every detail of what was going on in my parents' life and everything. Because I had this feeling that somehow I could change it. As a kid, I had this feeling that I put on my shoulders that somehow I could change it. So I was very aware, and I heard I just heard disturbing things. My dad would talk about his depression, and obviously, when you're using drugs and alcohol, you're not exactly always talking. It was just desperation. I heard a lot of desperation, even from a young age. And obviously, when I went to school, I still grew up with good, like my parents, my dad, my mom still taught us well. They still, you could say, raised us well. But there was definitely a traumatization of some sort where I went to school with a little bit of just almost like a depression, like as a kid. And me being like a smaller kid or whatever, like I never really always had this thing where I'll fight back, but I never really was an assertive person, if that makes sense. So I started struggling with acceptance and feelings of almost loneliness or abandonment, if that makes sense. And honestly, just a lot of stress because I loved my dad dearly. I loved him dearly, and I just wanted him and my mom to get along, and I just wanted our family to be okay because I just loved them. It was the only way I can put it. I loved them. So to wrap in the music thing, for me, we would, my dad was a DJ. Again, he would go downstairs when we would go to people's places, houses, playing music, and he had turntables. And I remember in our basement, he had this crazy big studio, and it was as a kid, it was mesmerizing. This big old studio with these big computer screens and big old speakers, subwoofers, and all this stuff. And as a kid, I was absolutely mesmerized. I was like, what is this? I remember sneaking downstairs. And yeah, it was crazy. And so my dad, we would listen to, whatever was popular. So at the time it was Eminem on the radio, Beastie Boys. I remember he listened to a lot of Sublime, stuff like that. And so growing up, I had that influence of just really liking hip-hop music. It was something that stuck with me. So as we started to get older, the chaos was becoming more aware to me and my sisters. I had two sisters, younger sisters growing up, and it was just becoming a regular thing now. My parents would have tax season come, and my dad, in the midst of all this, started a successful flooring business, but there was just a lot of emptiness because there was not purpose in our lives, if that made sense. And there was a lot of searching starting to go on. I remember my mom really wanted to go to church. We had some neighbors who became family friends, and they invited us to church, and so we started going. I don't remember exactly what time that was, maybe 10, 11, somewhere along those lines, and I started going to church, and I just remember going to church and feeling such a sense of peace, acceptance, hope. Because it seemed like when we were in church as a family, that's when my dad got sober. That's whenever my family was together. And I don't remember exactly. I remember one time when I was younger, this family friend came up and she looked at me and she told my mom, your son's face was just glowing in church today. And so it was just this thing where there's just a ton of peace when we were going to church and stuff. So, and I know there was searching going on in my parents' lives and my mom's life and my dad's life. Mom grew up in church a little bit. My dad, different story there. But and so started going to church, but the thing is, there would be a lot of in and out. Because my dad not really knowing what surrender meant at this point, and I promise I'm going to wrap this into my own story at some point, but my dad not really knowing what surrender meant, not knowing, not trusting this God that we were searching for, learning about, whatever, would go back out and use. And when that would happen, and as we started to get older, friends grew curious of where he was, and there was just a lot of pain in my heart. Because I loved my dad so much, but I started to grow just a little bit bitter as I started to get older. But I always wanted to defend him. No, we can't give up on him. That was the thing of my heart, I always felt like it was my responsibility to keep my parents together or something. That was something I grew up with as a kid. It's part of the obsessive compulsive I, struggle with obsessive compulsive disorder to this day, and it's part of that is a feeling of personal responsibility in people's lives and anxiety if anything goes wrong or if you can't control it or whatever, like having this personal responsibility to take care of others and that you're going to let people down. So I grew up with that. And as my dad would go out, man, I could probably think of a million more stories, but I'm going to try and just work this thing along. We'd go to school, and all I remember is just thinking about, where's my dad at? Where's my dad at? And I tried to get along school. I never really tried in school that much because there was just so much pressure on my head, like all the time about where my dad was. And I was like, I'm supposed to sit here and worry about this math homework, but my dad's out somewhere and my mom's at work and I don't know what's going on outside of the school building right now. And I just wish I could be home so I could control this thing and just whatever it was. And that thing grew to be very traumatizing for me as I got older. And I'll get into that a little bit. So, started getting older, started really experimenting with making my own music. I remember, downloading programs. My dad got me a computer or whatever. I mean, we still grew up with things, and my dad still had a good heart, and my mom, was very loving, and so we still grew up, like, you could say, in a good home. There was just a ton of pain there that was never dealt with, and so grew up with... I got a computer and I started downloading some of these programs my dad had on his computer, and he encouraged me and my mom encouraged me, and I started writing songs about being in and out of church now, having experiences with Jesus and having experiences with God and growing to know God to be real and a God that I could cry out to. I started writing songs about, war and issues in the world and peace and how I just want the world to come together and all these things. I started writing these very positive songs when I was 12, 13, maybe 14. I don't remember exactly. Probably 12, 13. And they were terrible. I mean, let me tell you something. They were absolutely terrible. Even at 13, I didn't even sound like a boy. I sounded like a girl, probably, as embarrassing as that sounds. So, but I was making music, and that's where music started to really grow in my heart. I remember there were a lot of good times as a family where we listened to a lot of Casting Crowns, Toby Mac. We went to Christian concerts, and this love for God grew in my heart. And as a family, my parents always, got involved in, youth groups and church gatherings, and we were always involved in church, and we were always doing something when we were at church. When we were at church, life was amazing, and I loved it, and I loved the covenant with God. And I remember so many times as a kid when my dad would go out to Akron, he would go to Hughes, and he'd go on a binge or something. I just remember times crying out to God, just absolutely crying out to him, just pleading that he would just bring my dad home. And I didn't understand why God couldn't just bring him home. And I don't remember the prayers exactly, but it was just desperate. Intertwined throughout all this, I remember using Eminem music a lot, Eminem's music. We would go to events as kids, the skating rink. We would go to the community center, as they called it, downtown, and Eminem would always be playing. We would even have these rap battles where we would see who could rap his verses better, and that was a rap battle to us. And I remember watching 8 Miles 50 times at 8 Mile for 50 times at a friend's house. So I grew up as that being a major influence for me, and I totally associated with it because I associated with the quote-unquote drug-addicted parent, the pain, all of it. I just associated with that thing. And so obviously growing up, there was a passion there. There was an association for me. I would go back and forth as I started getting older, becoming a teenager, not listening to that music, listening only to Christian music, and going back and forth. And now I know it was just not knowing how to trust God and so many different things, obviously, battle of the flesh and the spirit. But anyways, to fast forward a little bit, same story basically over and over with a lot of chaos in there. I remember one time when we were 14, capturing this picture of this angel on top of our church. Sounds unbelievable, I know. If you go to my Instagram, you can see the picture. To me, now knowing what I know, there's no doubt about it, what it is. That was always a staple for me. Like, oh my gosh, God, like, you just let me see that. That's amazing. Thank you so much for that gift. And I had a ton of spiritual experiences. I remember, and the reason I talk about spiritual experiences is just because I think it's important. Like, people just want to know this stuff's real. I mean, and it still takes faith to believe it either way. I mean, you can believe the stories I'm telling you, or you don't have to. Remember when I was a kid, I was really into video gaming, and I remember being up late, really late one night, and like 3 o'clock in the morning, making this clan website, as we called it, for this war game, this shooter, this video game. And I remember just feeling this darkness come upon me, and it cupped my ear, and it came up on my back, cupped my ear, and started whispering this like white noise stuff. And I'm not gonna do what it did because it's just freaky. But I remember turning around, and all I knew to say was, I'm covered by the blood of Jesus. And that thing, boom, left. Went downstairs, woke up my parents, freaking out. Like, you better come upstairs now. Like, get up here. I made them, like, my dad got a pastor to come and anoint my room with holy oil and, like, all types of stuff. I was freaked out. And if somebody even mentioned, like, I remember my sisters having friends over, and like there was like a mention of a Ouija board, and like I freaked out. I was like, no, that is not about to happen here. Anyways, as I grew older, my dad's addiction grew worse. I remember kind of just cruising through high school, not caring at all for homework or trying or any of that. I was involved in programs and had relationships with different friends and stuff like that. As I got older, though, eventually things came to a close in my parents' marriage, and they got a divorce. My dad, consequences finally caught up with my dad, as my mom, just, I don't know what else to do. And I didn't want that to happen. My whole life I had been trying to hold this thing together, feeling like I could do that or something. And my parents finally got a divorce, and that's where I really grew cold. That's where I basically gave myself over. I had friends growing up who, did drugs in junior high or whatever, and I always felt like I'm not going to drink, I'm not going to do drugs, whatever, because like I freaked out about things like that because I really didn't. Basically, I told myself, I'm not going to do what my dad does. I'm not going to, quote unquote, become like my dad. That was my idea anyway. So, when I turned 16, 17, actually one thing I really want to mention that really messed me up as a kid. Like, this is just to really highlight the chaos. My dad, I don't even know if I've ever told him this or if I ever mentioned it. I don't think I've ever mentioned this to him. But I remember being like 15, 16, I don't remember. I was really sneaky. So my dad was downstairs at his computer. I think he was like alone or people were sleeping. I don't remember, but it was just distress in the house. And I went downstairs to see what my dad was doing because I just knew he was distressed. I always went and snuck downstairs and listened through the vents or whatever. And I literally opened this door. He didn't even notice me. I opened this door, walked up back into his back room. I saw him on his computer, and I saw him, and I know it's terrible. I'm just trying to give people an idea of the chaos. I saw him writing his suicide letter. I watched my dad write a suicide letter. And I don't even know how I reacted. I just kind of put my head down and like, oh my gosh. Like, I can't even believe I got away with that because I don't know how he didn't hear me. Like, I must have been a sneaky dude because I got right up behind him as he was typing that thing. He didn't even know I was there. And so that really traumatized me in events like that. As I got older, eventually, like I said, my parents divorced and I got really cold, man. I was like, you know, I remember my friends asking me, would you smoke for the first time? Like, oh, I think I'd said something like, dude, you know what? I'd do whatever right now. I don't care. Like, I said that one night when we were all just hanging out. It might have been summer at this time. I don't remember. And he's like, really? So you'd smoke? And I said, yeah. And he's like, okay. So he's like, so we went to the park, we smoked, and then the same night, it's like, oh, so you'll smoke weed? And I was like, yeah, bro, I'll smoke weed. I don't care. And so my dad had done it for so long, and I was like, yeah, we'll find out what this is like. So I did it, and I didn't necessarily get like a feeling, but everyone else knew that I was high, basically. Like, that's what it was, is everyone else knew I was high because I was acting crazy, but I didn't think so. So it was, to me, really enjoyable. It just took away all of the pain, and it just got my mind off of all of the insanity going on in my house. So for me, right away, it just took off. Like, every opportunity I had to smoke, it basically became an everyday thing. My parents got divorced. I was living with my dad for a little while. I moved out of my dad's house, moved into my mom's house, and just down the road, really. And I was just off smoking every single day at that point, and driving around, whatever. Started drinking. And would come home. It's still needing to go to high school the next day, but would come home, and my mom's obviously calling me out on all this stuff, but I'm 17 and I'm doing my own thing and I'm defiant, and she doesn't know what to do because she's just trying her best, and she's not trying to control me. She knows, like, it's just craziness, and she has her own stuff going on, and she's trying to heal, and so start doing drugs and alcohol, man. You know what I mean? And at this point in my heart, I don't want anything to do with God. I don't want to hear about God. I really started getting into drugs pretty bad. So I just kept the drinking going, all that. Finally moved into my own apartment above my parents' business, H&R Block. Moved up there. It wasn't a very nice place to live necessarily, but I didn't pay any rent. And probably should have. And I basically just treated that place like crap, man. I really started to grow and have no respect for my parents or authority. And I remember, I started selling drugs up there. And I just started to feel real desperate and hopeless. Like, I wanted to live a different life. I didn't want it to be this life anymore. My dad, got sober here or there, and I just never really put my hope in that thing. Like, I got tired of putting my hope in my dad's sobriety. As I moved upstairs, H&R Block, I started getting into music. That's why I really started to get into rap music. Like, making rap music, and I had friends who were really into that thing, and we just loved music and we loved creativity, and so we just started making music. And with all the pain in my heart, I made music that sounded like the world. I made music that associated with my pain, associated with drug use, and associated with drinking, and obviously, overcompensating a lot in that music as well with the truth and just different things like that. But really just growing a love for music, got a mic, started recording. I made like a really messed up song about my dad, and then people were like, wow, dude, that's real. Like, that's awesome. And I know a while later I took it down because it was just, my dad was like getting sober, and like I was like, no, dude, I can't have that up. And I know it really hurt him, obviously. I don't even remember the song or anything about it, but so started getting into music, tried college like 4 different times, moved away, tried college. I remember that's when I really started having panic and anxiety. I remember I got high with these dudes, had no idea what, like, just felt like, who am I with and what am I doing? Like, I had no solid rock to lean back on, and I just had a panic attack, and I thought, I'm going to die. I was malnourished, not taking care of myself up at Kent State, and literally, like, had a panic attack and thought I was going to die that day. I couldn't remember anyone's names. Like, my brain, like, just went out, like, and that's when my OCD really, as a kid, I had symptoms just because of all the anxiety and trauma and stuff, but that's where it really took over. I remember for a 6-month period, I literally envisioned, if you were mowing the grass, like, I envisioned people, like, it sounds terrible. I mean, I hate to say it. I want to be godly about this, but I envisioned people getting, like, just, like, mangled by like lawnmowers, and like I just envisioned death and dying all around me all the time. It became a terrible obsession that I didn't want to envision, but it was just, I don't even know how to put it. I started to really develop some sickness there with the mental health. And I remember trying to take antidepressants, and it made it even worse. I couldn't smile if I wanted to. I remember my mom laughing, like, stop it. Like, but she really didn't know. Like, I literally wasn't faking it. Like, I tried to get a shower that day. It felt so gloomy. I felt messed up, dude. So this is where I'm really starting to struggle with acceptance issues and different things like this. Because I went off to college, and I just wasn't myself. I don't know how else to put it. I didn't even know who I was. I was exploring different religions. I was talking about new age religions. I was trying to fit Jesus in somewhere to that thing because I had experiences. I knew that God was real, but I started exploring different religions, experimenting with different drugs, doing psychedelics, experimenting with, Adderall or whatever, go to parties, go to college. And I hated college. It was never fun for me. Like, for real. Like, it was never fun for me, because for me, it felt like a bunch of kids pretending to be adults in their own little ecosystem and in their own little society. And maybe it was because I didn't really feel like I fit in, but I hated it. I really did. That's another story for another day. But so I would get different jobs, drop out of college, but it always came back down to this music. It always came back down to this music, secularly, that is. I remember having stints of trying to go back to church, but I never felt good enough, and so I would always run away from that thing quicker than I got there. I remember when I was a teen, like whenever I was in that apartment upstairs, New Yorksville, the youth group at my church, that my dad was attending regularly now, chasing me down, man. They'd come knocking on the door, and we were doing terrible things in there. We were just smoking upstairs, just clouds, and like I had this youth group banging on my door, and there'd be people downstairs like answering the door, like saying vulgar things and stuff. I felt so embarrassed. Like, I could never face these people ever again. That's how I felt. I wouldn't necessarily say that to the people I was hanging out with, but that's how I felt. And since I wanted to be accepted, I really just let people do whatever they want. But anyways, I started to get older, making music. I remember one really cool experience that I had. Actually, I'm gonna talk about an experience that I had whenever I was like 19 and I was really first getting into the weed and stuff like that. Like, I was on the beach with my buddy Chase Swaney, and we went to Myrtle Beach, I think it was. And I was not in a good place at all. I think I even snuck weed with me. And I don't know if his parents know that. Sorry. I think I even snuck weed with me. I don't remember. But anyways, I went on this vacation, and I remember just feeling so hopeless. I remember telling people at the time, my theme of life is hopelessness. I was saying that for a couple months. That's what I was saying to people in secret, friends or girlfriend or whatever. That's what I was saying. So I'm hopeless, and I remember just crying all the time on the couch or whatever. Went on this vacation. I stole this little bracelet from an outlet store, and I felt convicted about it. Dude, what am I doing? I didn't need to steal that. I just got this conviction in my heart all of a sudden, and I'm like, dude, I don't want to live like this. I'm smoking cigarettes, and I'm drinking, and I don't like this. So I go to my buddy, and I'm like, hey man, let's pray to God, bro, because I just miss God, and I want him back in my life. So we sat down, we prayed. He was with it. He had a church background, and we both grew up in church and believing, and so went to pray and just said, God, I miss you, and I want you back in my life. I just remember repenting. I don't remember exactly what the prayer was. It was just an honest prayer. I said, I miss you. We're going to go searching for a sign, God, on the beach. Please give us a sign. So we went searching on the sign, and my buddy came across this really cool sign with his name in the sand, and we saw Jesus Saves. But this made me break down. As we walk about a half mile down the beach, we come across this 15-foot inscription that spells out hope in capital letters. Super big on the beach. And the O was a heart. And I had prayed for a sign of hope. And inside the heart, it said, Austin, I miss you. And I literally just prayed for a sign of hope that God would accept me back because I missed him. And God was telling me he missed me. And I broke down in tears. I don't know if somebody else, drew that thing on the beach, or like my pastor said one time, did you check for the finger of God? Like, no, I didn't. But regardless, I knew that it was God, however it happened. And so that was one of the things that I always leaned on. So again, I've had experiences. Like, I'm growing up, I'm knowing these things. So anyways, to get back to the music thing, whenever I was like 22, 23, I'm making secular music. I'm having this buddy, Dame, telling me like, hey, you should get into Christian music. He's not necessarily a Christian. He's not necessarily trying to live for Jesus, but he's just tired of this lifestyle. And I'm running as far as I can from Jesus at this point. Like, no one's pulling me back. I don't care. I'm not getting my hopes up again. Now, my dad's sober for a couple years at this point. But I had been let down, quote unquote, in my heart, how I felt so many times that I was not putting my trust in God. I was not putting my trust in my dad. Like, there's no way. But deep down, I was convicted because I knew where I belonged. I knew I should be in church. I knew I should be walking with Christ. So, as it stands, I go to the park one day with my buddy Dame, and this man who I now know came up to me. His name's Conrad Miller, and he said, can I talk to you gentlemen for a second? Can I talk to you guys? And, we're kind of like, yeah, what's up, dude? Like, there's people everywhere. It's summer day. It's the park, right? And he's like, I'm a pastor. I'm out kind of just, I don't know what he said, evangelizing or just talk. I don't remember exactly what he said, but he's like, we start talking a little bit. And we're like, oh, okay, dude, cool. And he's like, give me a second. And he closes his eyes, and he opens his eyes back up, and he looks at me. He's like, I'm going to try and get a word for you. And he looks at me and says, you're a rapper. Now, he calls me out on that thing. That's literally like my life. That's what I'm doing. And like, he has no idea who I am, and I'm not wearing anything that would make you think I'm a rapper. I'm wearing gym shorts and like a tank top and just basketball clothes, just like everybody else in that day. But he called me, he said, you're a rapper. He started to prophesy some things to say, God's called you to mighty things. And obviously now looking back, like, I'm amazed at all the things that God has done. But at the time, nope. I was encouraged by it or whatever. My buddy was like, oh my gosh, I told you to do Christian rap, bro. I'm telling you. And I don't remember exactly how I felt, but all I remember is after that day, just dodging him, just dodging Conrad. I saw him at, the daily grind here, there, and I dodged him because I didn't want to hear about Jesus. I didn't want to talk about Jesus. I was running. So anyways, as I get older, I'm still making the secular music, and the secular music starts to grow, and people start to get behind it. I started not sounding like an Amish boy from Ohio anymore. My music actually started to get good. It started to get better as I put a lot of work into it. Guys, listen, I know it's a talent, but I promise you I put a lot of work into it. I've been really practicing this thing my whole life. So anyways, I'm chasing this thing, man. And, with everyone who's listening to this probably knows, with Cody Garbrandt's success, like, that made me want to chase that thing even more. Cause I'm like, dude, I cannot sit back and not be great and just let other people be great and me have this feeling like I have this greatness in me, this call to be great, and not do it, right? But as it started to grow, I started to get really arrogant, and I'm making songs that are just downright, the songs that I was making were downright blasphemous. One of the lines from them was, oh no, sorry, Hove, I gotta go. I turned prodigal like I ain't got a home. Like, I literally was making songs about not going back to God. Like, I was making almost like cry for help. I was making songs that were talking about, I hope this life is worth it, and just being blasphemous, man. Just being blasphemous. And to me, I was going to become this great person. And this great superstar is what I had made up in my mind, and everybody's going to bow down to me. All the people who rejected me, who never accepted me, you are going to find out what I'm capable of. That's where my heart was at, and you're going to bow down to me. And if you don't bow down, well, then you can get it. That's how I felt. Like, you can get it. You know, you're going to find out one day. I wanted to become greater than all my friends who had went on to get college degrees and they were living their successful lives. Like, it was this or nothing. That's how I felt. It was this or nothing. So, anyways, start doing this music. Start opening up for some bands. Twisted. Start opening up for Twisted, and they're like a really popular underground band. Face paint and all that, but like I wasn't into that, but it was like my come up. And I'm making music with my buddies, with my buddy really, and we're making music and we're chasing this thing, man, and that's how I felt. But I remember making this one song. I'll get into that actually a little later. Particularly when I was working at this I'm gonna go right into that actually. When I remember it all came to a close where I through this process, I started doing cocaine probably 6 months before the music started to take off, and I started getting into cocaine really bad and really heavy. And I told myself I was never going to do cocaine because I was never going to be like my dad who was doing hard drugs or whatever. He had been sober. Oh, there's my phone. Okay. Sorry, dude. Got to ignore that. Anyways, I told myself I would never be like my dad who had did hard drugs or whatever. But I started doing them because, again, I'm on this thing, bro. I'm running. I don't care. Like, oh, well, too late. That's how I felt. I'm gone. There's no saving me. You can't save me. That's how I felt. Well, started doing this music, and it all came to a head whenever I went to the bar, was usual. My drug addiction was just growing at this point. I was getting drunk every single day, and every time I would drink, I'd do crazy things, man, because I felt terrible about myself, so I tried to overcompensate by doing insane things all the time to get people to notice me and get me the attention that I so craved. I just craved attention. I craved love. And so I drank like four Long Island iced teas, which have like 4 different liquors in them within like half an hour to 20 minutes. I don't remember exactly, but I just downed these things. I was the kind of person who went to the bar and said, no, I'm not drinking tonight, and then I'd be the most hammered person there. So anyways, I did cocaine that day. It's midday. I'm already blacked out. I do a bunch of stuff. Like, I go and I do a bunch of stuff, and then I come to at like middle of the day, like 4 or 5 o'clock. Like, I come to, meaning like I gain my consciousness back, right? I start drinking again, and I black out again. I blacked out twice in the same day within a couple hour period. I start driving my car around aimlessly, and this is where most people have heard about my wreck on the highway, and this is when it happened. I got into a 90 to 70 mile per hour collision on the highway. A woman was texting and driving, and I was swerving all over the road. There were cars everywhere. The Stadies apparently were a half mile ahead of me, waiting to pull me over. They had received so many calls about how bad I was driving. And I got in a really bad collision that day. Flipped my car off the highway, and I'll tell you right now, I should have died. There's no reason that I should have lived. I love you, God, so much. Thank you, Lord. There's no reason that I should have lived. I was blacked out of my mind. I should have killed somebody. I should have killed somebody. I should be in prison right now. That's how I feel. This is like a second chance at life for me. So I get in this wreck, right? And it didn't wake me up. I was so distraught, so lost, that I still was doing the secular thing. Like, my dad was at the window tapping on it. You know, my mom's face is just in horror as she walks up to this scene. My dad walks up, says, Austin, this is a second chance that God's giving you a life, bro. And I was just so drunk and out of it, I wasn't hearing it. And I was giving the officers problems at the Stady Highway Patrol office or whatever. And so, anyways, as it goes, I kept drinking. And I even made a secular song that went on my album about the wreck. So that's kind of where the timeline falls, is I still had time. I was still doing secular music after this wreck enough to make a song about it. Made a song about it, and one of the lines said, And maybe it's because I love so openly that God can see some hope in me and knows I'm not a broken dream. So in the middle of this album, I'm saying very blasphemous things against God, against Christianity, but I'm still crying for help a little bit. And I remember I was driving home, absolutely plastered one night from a buddy's house. And that song, this is after I got my DUI. I'm still drinking and driving, by the way. I even passed a sheriff, I think, this night. I don't remember. But I'm driving home, and the radio, as that part is playing, completely goes to 100, man. Just blasts itself like God is screaming at me. Like, and maybe it's because I love so openly that God can see some hope in me and knows I'm not a broken dream. God's saying, yeah, you're not a broken dream. I love you. But... And I think it actually caught my attention. I was like, oh my gosh, maybe that's God. Like, maybe that's God, right? But I had no idea that I had so many things that God had to deal with inside of me. Pride and things that I thought was everybody else's fault. But I'm going to get into that. So anyways, I keep doing the secular music, but eventually the consequences catch up to me. I'm starting to have health problems that have been going on for a year or two now, and it's really getting bad. I'm having panic attacks every day. Every day I'm having panic attacks, wondering if I'm going to die. I'm afraid to die. I remember being at work at Stepping Stone at one point, and like some crazy supernatural stuff started happening to me. I was going out to graves and like trying to talk to the dead, bro. I was going out to graves and trying to talk to the dead, and literally started like getting haunted at Stepping Stone. Now, people that listen to this are going to think this is crazy, dude, and people aren't going to want to hear this. I don't care. I'm telling you the truth. I remember being there. I was making loud music. It was 3 o'clock in the morning. All the guys were asleep in the house. And I was like sitting there like rapping. And I was sitting there in this kitchen. There was like a doorway, and then it went outside for this kitchen. It was like a small block kitchen, and there was a doorway to come into the kitchen, and then just a thing outside. There was nobody up in this house, man. And there was a trash can there that had like a lid on it that was on a swivel that you could like put something in, and then it would swivel itself back to level to close the thing, right? And I was sitting there, I was rapping real loud, and all of a sudden I hear a smack, and I look over, and this trash can is just going like somebody, like a human had just smashed this thing in front of me, but no one was there. And I looked over at this thing, and I just got chills all up my body, right? I was freaking out. So I go home that day. I walk out the house like, no, dude, I can't do this. What is this, right? Because I'm seeking out answers, and I'm seeking out, like, I'm really, like, listening for, I don't know how to put this, but like the dead. Like I'm watching ghost stories and all this stuff, bro. And then like stuff starts to reach out to me, and it's not cool, right? So I tell my mom about it, and she's trying to tell me, Austin, you are covered by the blood of Jesus. Jesus loves you. Like, you don't have to worry about this stuff. But I'm not living for Jesus. And I didn't want to believe that anyway. So I was just like, yeah, whatever. You know what I mean? I remember her telling me a story about a friend of mine trying to take his own life, and I didn't even cry a tear, bro. That's how cold I was. I didn't want to hear it. I even told her, like, Mom, I can't cry right now. Like, I don't even want to hear that. This is how messed up I was. Anyways, as that stuff's going on, dude, stuff's really starting to come to a head, because now I'm starting to get consequences for my actions, and I'm about to lose my license for like 2 years or like a year and a half or whatever. I got caught driving without my license. And life is just terrible, dude. Like, I'm feeling anxiety every single day, and I'm just hopeless, right? And so then I remember I'm supposed to have this concert opening for Twisted again, and this would be the second one that I was going to do for them. And I was having terrible stomach problems, dude, and like I was having problems with my heartbeat and stuff, like for real, like. And I remember I canceled the show, and people were mad at me, and they were like, dude, it's all in your head, bro. Like, you are so much in your head. You need to chill out. And, but I didn't care. Like, what I was going through was real. So I canceled this show, right? I started going to AA meetings with my dad, faith-based meetings. My dad had been sober for 5 years now, right? So now, like, he's sober, and I know that I should be living the life that he's living right now, sober and living for God. But I had no idea all this stuff that was going on inside of me. Like, I just thought it was everyone else's fault. I didn't have to take any personal responsibility for it. So I go to these meetings, and I start to hear about God. And I start to hear about step 1, powerlessness. And I didn't get that. What does that mean? What is powerlessness? It doesn't make any sense to me. And so I start going to these meetings, and I remember one night, as my panic attacks and my health problems grow, I went downstairs in my bed feeling just distraught from all the panic, OCD, all this. And I went downstairs. I looked up Jesus on Google. And I come across a testimony of a lady who died for a couple hours. And I think she shot herself. She shot herself. And I don't remember if she went to hell or heaven. I don't remember. But all I know is I believed her. I knew that what she was telling me was the truth, dude. And so I knew that Jesus was real too. And so I cried out that night to Jesus. I cried out and I said, Lord, I don't remember exactly how the prayer went. All I know is I said, I miss you. I need you. I need you. You know, step 1, powerlessness. Step 2 came to believe a power greater than ourselves. And that's where I was at. I needed to believe in a power greater than myself. And that was Jesus Christ. The same Jesus that I had seen and witnessed and knew. I cried out to him that day, and I felt a presence in the room. Like, I felt like he's here. Like, I know that he's real, and I know that he hears me. And I just felt like he's here, right? And so from that day, I got a conviction. I was selling drugs at the time. I gave all of the drugs away. Completely. Like $1,000 worth of drugs. I just gave it away. I said, I don't want this anymore, man. You can keep it. I started to get really convicted about my music and the people I was hanging out with. So I had this album, and I heard, you know, about leading people astray. I was really into YouTube. I was YouTubing a lot of testimonies. Atheists who didn't believe in Jesus, and they didn't believe in an afterlife at all. And like these atheists and Buddhists and all these people were all saying, I died and I saw Jesus, or I died and I went to hell. And I looked up like hundreds of testimonies of people. I was kind of obsessed with it because really struggling with still doubting this thing, you know? And I wanted proof. That was where I wanted proof. But I started to grow, man, and, you know, the music, the secular music started to get really convicted about still having it on my computer. Like, I felt like, oh my gosh, I led my brothers and sisters astray. I led them to chase after this superstar mentality, and I made them all bow down to me, as that's what I felt like, and go chase your dreams and don't live for God, live for yourself. Like, that was my mantra. And I was leading people astray. So I deleted every ounce of music that I had. A lot of people told me that was stupid. I did not care. It freaked me out. It was a temptation, man. A big temptation to go back to the world and create a name for myself and all this. A large temptation to do that. So anyways, I delete all my music, start going to meetings, start learning about God, and I'm just starting to get on fire because I'm starting to learn who Jesus is. I'm starting to talk to this God. I'm starting to learn about this God. I'm starting to, you know, discipleship with my pastor and doing these things, and I'm going to meetings. And, you know, the Christian music, I didn't really release a song until like 8 months of recovery. I started making songs, but I didn't really release a song until like 8 months in my recovery. And really felt like, okay, this is what I'm good at. I'm just going to start making music again. I can't say that I knew that God called me to this, but I will say I had that prophecy from Conrad that day at the park about hip-hop music and you're called to do great things. So that kind of always just solidified it for me. So I'm like, you know what, I'm going to do this. So that's when I started making the Christian music. And I had a conviction. I'm keeping this about Christ. If I make Christian music, I'm keeping this thing about Jesus because he saved my life, and my life is not my own. This was a second chance at life that God gave me, literally. Not only are we saved by his blood, but he literally saved my life. And so I need to keep this thing centered around him. So I've made probably double the songs that are released. No, probably more than that, but I never released them because I felt like they weren't from the Spirit of God. And that's another topic for another day. And I'm just going to talk a little bit about where I'm at now. Now I'm 2.5 years into recovery. I have this amazing testimony, and I have a revelation of who Christ is, and I'm growing in my revelation of who Christ is. I can't tell you guys how thankful I am to be saved, that he revealed himself to me, that he showed himself to me, that he loved me, that he rescued me, that he protected me. I could tell you guys way more stories about all the protection over my life. Rescued from fights, rescued from this, rescued from that. God has rescued me over and over and over again. because he didn't see me for my mistakes and who I was in that moment. He saw me for who I could be if I partnered with him. If you can't tell, I'm getting passionate about it because I am so thankful, so grateful for all the things God has done for me. I have a bed to sleep in at night. I have an amazing family. I'm not perfect now, right? But I will say this, my attitude has completely changed from where I was. I used to be such a selfish, I can still be selfish at times. I'm being honest with you guys. I'm growing in that thing right now. I really am. And I'm really learning that, you know what, that's my flesh. And I need to follow the Spirit. And so I'm growing in that thing. But I used to be such a selfish jerk. Drug dealing, doing drugs, telling other people to get your own, do your own thing. Do away with God. And Jesus Christ showered me with his grace. And I'm getting a revelation for just how precious that blood is, just how all-encompassing that blood is to cover every single sin. As I've grown, I've struggled with trusting God even to this day just because of trauma from my past and stuff like that. But to this day, I'm learning to trust in God. He is my shelter. He is my rock. He is my covering. I can trust him with my life. And where I'm at right now is, as I've done this Christian music or whatever, I've had an opportunity to garner some fruit, man, and just like tell my testimony. And people really like it. And, people tell me like, oh, this is anointed. And then there's people who don't like it or whatever. Where I'm at right now is I don't need to build a name for myself. God opens doors. And he'll open doors that no man can close. I don't need to manipulate this thing for myself. God is opening doors for me if I just go with what I already have, because I have this testimony. I have revelation. He's already given me so much, and that's what I'm doing with this testimony right now as I share this with you guys. I don't know who's still with me, who's listened to this thing all the way through. I appreciate you guys listening to it. I just pray that this would encourage you. I pray that this would encourage you. If Jesus is willing to save a blasphemous, drug-dealing, fornicating thief like me, I don't care who you are. I don't care what you've done. He's willing to save you if you cry out to him. I think if you don't even know that he's real, if you would just cry out and say, God, just be honest, man. If you really want the truth, man, you would do this. I don't care about the skepticism. If you really want the truth, you would cry out and you would say, God, I don't know if you're real, but I want you to show me. That's what you would do if you really wanted to know. Because I promise you, I will put God's name on the line. He will show up. He would want me to do that. I'm willing to put his name out there and say he will show up in your life if you cry out to him with an honest heart cry, because that's the covenant that we're in now. And I can't tell you guys how grateful I am that he saved me, that he rescued me. I get to hear stories of recovering addicts 20 years, 10 years, all the time. God has put me in a place where I get to go and share my testimony with recovering addicts, filled with the Holy Spirit. Now I'm really in a place where I just want to seek the kingdom. Seek first the kingdom, and all these things will be added to you. That's where I'm at. I just want to go. And I just want to tell people he's real and he loves you. He loves you, and you need him. Quit trying to fill your life with all of those things that will never fill you. Stop being so prideful and just cry out to him. I tell you this because I love you. And you do need him. You do need him because there is an eternity. And this is going to be another topic for another day, but there is an eternity. And Jesus Christ is Lord. God has given him everything in heaven and in earth. Every knee shall bow, every tongue will confess that Christ is Lord. He is King. And he is the most gracious, beautiful, awesome King. One of the revelations that God gave me, I was telling Rick about this just last night, that, people get around celebrities like LeBron James or, who's a celebrity, Kevin Hart or whatever. I don't know why I said Kevin Hart, but, LeBron James, Eminem, Tiger Woods, and they would be shivering. Like, their palms would be sweaty. They'd be like, oh my gosh, that's LeBron, bro. Go get a picture with him. If he said anything about, let's hang out today, you would freak out, bro. You would freak out. Okay, if you think that that's how you're going to act in front of LeBron James, let me tell you what's going to happen when you stand in front of Jesus Christ, the one, the creator, the Father, the King. You will be struck with awe at the sight of his glory. I promise you. And God has extended his hand to you in mercy. He says that those who believe in the Son have been given right to be called children of God. If you believe in Jesus, let me just encourage you today. If you believe in Jesus, the one of all creation has chosen you because you can't believe without his help. We've been given a measure of faith. God looks at the heart. He looks at the seekers. Are you seeking truth right now? Are you seeking him? I would encourage you to cry out to him. It took me a long time to learn that this was a God that I could trust. This is a God that loves me. I'm still learning. I can trust this God. I can trust him. I can trust him. He does it for the reputation of his great name. It's his glory. His glory is the things that we get to experience. It's the thing. It's the showering of his love. No one is going to steal his glory because his glory is for his children to enjoy. So I would just encourage you, if you're wondering, man, if you're desperate, if you're hopeless, I promise you there is a hope. I promise you. If you're stuck in sin right now, let me tell you something about sin. A lot of the times the reason that we run back to sin is because we see God as a father ready to chastise us, not to shower his love on us. And so we are not going to run to the Father's lap. We're going to give into that temptation every time because that temptation seems sweeter than the Father's lap. But it is a lie. It is a deception. Sin promises so much, but I promise you it can't offer you what you seek, and that is fulfillment. But you already know that if you're a Christian struggling with sin. You already know that. I would say if you take on the title of Christian, if you don't talk to God regularly, I've had a big struggle with this in my prayer life because of fears and anxieties and all this stuff. But I'll tell you this much, man. He's sweet. He is a loving father. You need to check yourself and see if you really have a relationship with him or if you're just practicing religion. Seriously, it's important because religion is terrible. It gives you the idea that you're good with God when you're not. For those people that are good with God and have anxiety, don't freak out on me right now. I'm not talking about you. Talking about people who don't really love the Father. They love the idea of religion. And if you don't know Jesus, cry out to him. I promise you, I can put his name on the line. He will answer the call. Thank you guys for listening to this podcast. Thank you guys for listening to my testimony. I know it was long, but I hope this encourages somebody. Share this thing, please. Go like my page. Go follow my Instagram. I'm really just about sharing the gospel right now. So I'm not stressing about it. Share if you want to. Share this podcast. Let's just make the name of Jesus known all across the world. I love you guys. Thanks for listening. Talk to you later. Peace out. Just to lose your soul.